If you've been on social media lately, you might have seen some incredible pictures of Johnny Cash moose hunting right here in this province. The images were taken in October of 1961, and they capture a young Johnny Cash before he became the music icon we know him as today. A man named Saul Holiff, a Canadian promoter, brought Cash to this province in hopes of becoming the singer's manager. The plan worked, and many credit Holiff for guiding a music career that had stalled. Saul Holiff's son, Jonathan, found these images with countless other items shortly after his father's death. Martin spoke with Jonathan Holiff about the discovery, about the images themselves, and about how finding them helped him grieve his father's passing.
Jonathan, what brought your dad and Johnny Cash to Newfoundland?
Well, I think Saul was trying to impress Johnny. They had just finished a 10-date tour of Ontario that May in 1961 when the conversation turned to hunting. Cash was an excellent hunter. My father hated the idea of hunting, but hoping to impress Cash, he suggested they travel to Newfoundland and hunt and do a small tour.
And they did a couple of stops around the island, again, as he was more of an emerging star than anything else, right?
That's true. In fact, at that stage, he had basically fallen off the charts for the previous 2 years. And they ended up, I think, doing 4, maybe 5 cities in Newfoundland. We're still trying to confirm the dates and exact venues.
Okay. Now, these pictures, some of them are really incredible. Walk us through a couple of the ones that stand out, because I know the ones you've recently posted on Facebook, some of them have never been seen before.
That's right. We posted 6, and as I mentioned, there's a total of 35 new photos. Of the 6, which I find probably the most interesting, includes a mix, of course, of casual shots and shots of hunting, but also a few concert shots. And for me personally, the most interesting part is who was there. In addition to Johnny and Saul, there was Gordon Terry, there was the Tennessee Three, that's Marshall Grant, W.S. Holland, and Luther Perkins, Johnny Western, country and western great Merle Haggard, but also Rose Maddox, who was the girl singer before June Carter.
Amazing. And I know that your father was instrumental in introducing June Carter to Johnny Cash, too, right?
Well, technically, they met briefly backstage at the Opry about 5 years earlier. But it was Saul who, when Rose Maddox confided to him that she was leaving the tour, was the one to suggest and indeed hire June Carter for the Big D Jamboree that December in 1961. And the rest, as they say, is music history.
It's, yeah, absolutely music history. And looking at these pictures, Jonathan, am I right in assuming here he's about in his mid to late 20s before he really rose to stardom? This was also before a lot of the troubles that he had with addiction, too, right?
That's absolutely right. He would have been 29 years old, by the way, the same age as the hunting guide, Heman Whalen. And it was at exactly the moment in time where he started to miss concerts. The excuse was always, of course, laryngitis, but it was overdoing it on the pills. And unfortunately, the next 10 years were a roller coaster ride. Ultimately, however, arriving at the end of the decade where he was on top and outselling the Beatles in North America.
People have contacted you with the original negatives of some of these pictures too, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's the only reason we can mount an exhibit, because there's no shortage of photos of Johnny Cash on the internet. But of course, they're all too small to be used outside of social media. And when you combine them with the thousands that I have from my father's collection, it makes for a very worthwhile in-person exhibit experience.
Jonathan, something out of a movie almost is how you discovered these new photographs as well. Walk us through that whole situation.
Sure. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and frankly, I had been estranged from my father for several years when he passed away. And I went home to Victoria, British Columbia, where, looking in on my mother, discovered that he had kept a storage locker for many years. And in that locker, I discovered a number of boxes with the name Johnny Cash on them. And it was really like finding a treasure. In addition to 600 letters and 5,000 photographs, I found old reel-to-reel tape, audio tape, with 60 hours of audio diaries and secretly recorded phone calls between the two men.
I mean, like, it's a treasure trove, really, of music history.
It is, and I'm pleased to tell you that we just recently donated all of it to the University of Victoria, which established the Saul Holiff Archive, so everybody can enjoy it.
What fascinates me with this part of the story is that there's this secret storage locker you had no idea existed. You were estranged from your father at the same time. When you discover this, was there a little bit of discovery of who your dad was as well?
Absolutely. In fact, my father committed suicide, and he didn't leave a note. And that, of course, is a very long story. But suffice it to say that discovering this material was a cathartic experience and really helped me process my grief, as it were.
Jonathan, I want to go back again to those photographs. I'm fixated on these images. Some of them professionally done. I know during that moose trip that there was a professional photographer. Some of them were candid shots as well. Take us back to that time again. I know you've had a chance to chat with the gentleman who was Johnny Cash's sort of hunting guide.
That's right. Heman Whalen is still with us, thankfully, at age 88, and he has a near perfect memory of the events of 60 years ago. So it has been delightful to get all of this history and insight from Mr. Whalen, and we're still trying to reconstruct the various concerts Johnny performed on that tour with the hope of going to Newfoundland and exhibiting these 35 photos and other material someday soon.
What else do you hope to do with all these artifacts and these stories that inevitably will start coming in now?
Well, as you can imagine, I didn't know how deep this story ran until I started researching it. Initially, of course, these photographs are newsworthy and they deserve to be seen by the public. So it started with the interest in mounting an exhibit and perhaps even a Johnny Cash tribute concert in St. John's and perhaps the other cities that Johnny visited. But since getting into the material, there's certainly enough here for a short documentary, 22 minutes in length, and that's something I'm discussing with CBC at this time.
Jonathan, listen, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Thanks for sharing those pictures, too, and keep us posted with all the stories you hear, okay?
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Jonathan Holiff is an independent filmmaker. His father, Saul Holiff, managed music icon Johnny Cash. Jonathan says he knows what incredible storytellers Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are, and he's inviting anyone with their own stories of Johnny Cash in Newfoundland to contact him through his Facebook page. When emergency